Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending, of course, on where you are calling in from. And if you are further ahead time-wise, maybe it's already good evening for you. Either way, I'm delighted that you are here and we are getting started because we need every minute that we have at our disposal. There's a lot of content to share, but I don't want to rush through it. I want to make sure that we have opportunity to engage in it. And the rules of engagement, which I probably will repeat a few times throughout the course of this webinar, especially because people will be joining us over the next bunch of minutes, is that I would like it very much to be interactive. I will be pausing from time to time to get your input. Certainly, you could ask questions or share comments. I will be looking at the chat as often as I possibly can. In the meantime, if you could use the chat to quickly share your name and where you are calling in from, and if you would like to add anything about your position, what it is that you do professionally, and whether or not, or maybe you could address a little bit about how delegation does or hopefully will serve you in your professional practice. So again, your name, where you're calling in from, a little bit about your profession, and specifically how you, let's reframe it, what you hope to get out of today's session as it relates to delegation, why you registered, and what you hope to get out of our time together today. So again, use the chat, please, for that. I'll be looking at it. I know it takes a few moments for people to type, for it to populate. So let's pause for a second, give everyone a chance to do that. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Naftali Hoff, and I am in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, not far from New York City. I'm a former school leader. I'll get into all of that soon, and I'll talk about how delegation became so important to me in my professional work. Welcome, David. Again, we're going to keep all videos off, please, so as not to distract. I'm only keeping mine on because it's easier to connect a voice with an image. But outside of that, thank you for honoring that request. And please do use the chat early and often for engagement. And of course, for any questions or comments you might have. I'm going to move forward, but I'm going to continue to look at the chat and see if anyone else will join David in sharing a little information. Welcome, Ellie. Louisville, Kentucky. So nice to see you or have you here. Baltimore's represented. Tampa, fantastic. Welcome, Carlos. Okay, going to be looking through all of this, probably more in detail afterwards. But if I can skim through and see what specific things I can focus on or should be focusing on, I think that would be fantastic. Okay, yeah, you're talking about wanting to grow and how delegation would be such an important piece. Jonathan, if you want to add what drew you to this presentation, that would be fantastic as well. And I'm so glad that you're in nonprofit leadership. Go Texas. Okay, and Daniel, a neighbor of mine, actually. Nice to see you on the call as well. All right, fantastic. So thank you for sharing why you are here. Anyone else who would like to do the same, please do so. And again, let's use the chat early and often to make sure that we are responding. I hope you'll be able to use the thumbs up when appropriate. Of course, use the chat for quick answers or any questions you might have. Okay, so we've got delegation to talk about in great detail. Oh, that's an important one, Jonathan. Thank you. We're going to go there soon. All right, so why you're going to want to stick around until the very end? That's because, first of all, this webinar is packed with useful information and practical tips to get more done. This is not my first rodeo, by the way, on multiple levels. I've delivered many webinars before. And more importantly, I've delivered content around delegation before. And so, and I've practiced it. And so I know that what I'm sharing has value. People have shared with me what they've gained out of it, and I hope you'll be able to do the same. So actually, as we go through this, I'm going to ask you to take notes. And at the end, when I ask you, hopefully I will remember to ask you for your biggest takeaways, you'll be able to do so. So please do be mindful of that as you hear something insightful, something that resonates with you, please just jot it down so that you have it at your disposal. And I am going to be making special offers for you because I have an incredible, I believe, an incredible offering that's going to take what it is that we're going to discuss today to a whole new level. And because you've taken time out of your busy schedule to be here with me and to participate and to make sure that I'm not talking to myself on this call today, I want to recognize and reward you with that special offer. So please do stick around to the end because I'm not going to be sharing that information until we draw to a close. So I have a couple of questions I want to ask you. And the first one is as follows. Are you completely overwhelmed? And by the way, a quick yes in the chat would be totally fine here. And if the answer is no, you can say no as well. Are you completely overwhelmed at work, putting out fires all day, not getting a moment to concentrate on the many things on your desk? Are you wary of asking your colleagues to do anything because they're too busy, will resent it, or simply can't do it right? Do you feel like you are neglecting your health and personal life for the sake of just keeping things together at work? Do you feel that the way things are going right now is simply unsustainable? And if it's easier for you, okay, well, I'm going to ask you to please share what specifically you said yes or no to. So, Ellie, if you wrote no, or Eli, I'm not sure. Regardless, if there's something in particular that you're saying no to, that's fine. If it's to everything, that's fine as well. If maybe what we could do is we could prioritize here and say which of the four, let's number them 1, 2, 3, 4. From the top to the bottom, of course, number one would be on the top with the firemen. Maybe list which of these would you say is your biggest problem. So if putting fires out all day is your number one, do four, followed by, I'm sorry, do one, followed by whichever one comes next. Okay, and of course, thank you, Colleen. It will vary by the day. It will vary by the situation without question. Okay, if you don't have staff at the moment, David, we are going to talk about how to address that, right? That doesn't mean that this is not a relevant conversation to you. Okay, Ellie, thank you for sharing. Okay, I wanted to be sure. All right, no to 1 and 3, yes to 2. What about 4? All right, 1, 4, 3, and 2. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a variance over here. I'd love to see from others as well. Which of these would you say is your biggest issue? I'm going to continue to look at that as I move forward with the content. Once again, for those of you who joined us a little bit late, please do use the chat early and often for engagement, questions, feedback, etc. Okay, and so let's move on in the meantime. But I want to tell you that you should not give up, right? It's not your fault if you've struggled with managing your time until this point. If you're worried that you're never going to be able to get control of your time, you should put those fears to rest, because I'm here to show you how to get control of your day and start managing your time so that it works for you and not the other way around. You know, it's so interesting. Just yesterday, I met with a prospective client who I believe I'm going to be working with on a deeper dive productivity one-to-one coaching. And literally, it seemed like myself and some others who scheduled appointments with him, we set his day, not the other way around. And he admitted to that. And that's something that I think all of us want to be giving additional consideration to. How do we take a proactive stance to our day? How do we prioritize? And delegation is a huge piece in getting control of our day, our time, our focus, our energy, all of those elements. Who do not give up, because I'm here to help. And what's relevant here is that we will all be able to support one another in this process. Okay, my goal for this webinar, what is it, right? I'm a former, for those of you who don't know, I think I mentioned at the beginning, not only did I indicate that I'm a former head of school, but I'm actually a former classroom teacher. And so I know a thing or two about education. And one thing that I know for sure is that every lesson needs an objective. I also need to know how I'm going to measure it. I'm not going to get into that today, but I will tell you what it is that I want as a goal for the objective for this webinar so that we can get the most out of it. Number one is to teach. So I want to teach everybody how to delegate work to others so that you can, number one, get more of the right stuff done. So it's not about busy. It's about being busy with the right work. Number two, reduce stress. And number three, leave the office at a decent hour every day to spend more me and we time by yourself or with loved ones, depending, of course, on which one you're referring to. Let's pause for a moment. I just want to take a look at the chat. I also would love to get your feedback on this slide and to find out which of these three, if accomplished, would be most meaningful for you. So again, let's order them 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, whatever that looks like for you. Which would be, in your mind, the biggest benefit as it relates to today's webinar? Thank you, Yechiel. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Carlos. Once again, if you only have one, that's fine. But if you have all three and you just want to prioritize, I'd love to see it formatted that way as well. Okay, so it looks like one is pretty popular here. Get more of the right stuff done. It's actually a topic that goes beyond productivity, as I'm sure you could imagine. It's also a matter of focusing on what is the most important work, things like the 80-20 rule. We're not going to dive into that necessarily, but we will touch on it peripherally because it is important when you think about what you should be doing versus what somebody else should be doing. All of that will be relevant in our conversation today. So this is my goal. These are some of the areas we're going to focus on. But before I dive into it, I do want to let everybody know, you probably have been on a webinar before. Would you mind just indicating how many of you have attended at least 3 webinars in your lifetime? You could just indicate that in the chat. You could just say 3 or 3 plus. Me, 3 plus is totally fine. Dan, I love that. I think I know what that answer means. Okay, around 3 or more. Yeah, so if you've been on a bunch of webinars, you probably know that number one, it's hard to properly internalize information, which is why, by the way, one of the things that I will emphasize now, and I'll try to do it again later on, is that if you try to grab too much, this is a Talmudic dictum, that if you grab too much, you'll grab nothing. So you don't want to try to do everything or grab everything in a 1 hour plus webinar, because it's really, really difficult to take in all that information and utilize it right away. But what you do want to do is identify a few things that are most meaningful to you that you could immediately implement into your daily practice. That means today, tomorrow at the latest. But regardless, everybody I think understands that a webinar is not the same in terms of the depth of learning, in terms of the integration, forming new habits, all the kinds of things that are necessary for true growth to occur. You need more in-depth learning. And so for the best way for you to get control of your time, to learn how to delegate, to become more organized, and to get more done is through in-depth training. And the best way that I can suggest to do that is through the Delegate to Accelerate Masterclass. I'll take a moment to share what that is before we dive into the content of our webinar today. The masterclass will do what we're going to do today, but in much greater depth. We'll talk about why we need to delegate. By the way, it's a four-part series. Why we need to delegate, what to delegate and what not to delegate, who to delegate to, and how to delegate. Right? Some basic fundamental questions you probably were never taught the answers to before. Maybe you've done some trial and error, but very, very few people have ever told me that they've had formal training around delegation. And it's something that I've had to learn through trial and error myself, through research, through practice, and I'm happy to share it all with you. So that's a bit about the masterclass. And for those of you who are not familiar, I am a performance coach, executive coach and performance coach, organizational consultant. I'm a very proud 2-time author. I've actually just recently released my 2nd book. So now I have 2, which is very exciting for me. And I'm going to share that with you actually now in the chat so that you can grab a copy if you would like. Let's see what comes through here. Hold on one second. Okay, so you got 2 different links there. One to Becoming the Productive Boss, which is my newest book. That's the blue one. And one to Becoming the New Boss, which is my original book. Both of them are great for leaders, but they have a different focus. And the one about productivity is really central to what we're going to be talking about today. And thankfully, the weather warming up here in Jersey, my part-time gardener skills are back in focus. Okay, so what I do, most leaders struggle to manage their workloads and get home at a decent hour. I help them delegate and be more productive so they can get more done with less stress. So that's a little bit about me. I'm excited you're here. Let me tell you a little bit more about my backstory, and then we're going to dive in because ultimately I need to be able to prove to you that I know what I'm talking about. So when I arrived in Atlanta in 2010, the school had approximately, we grew, so maybe 350 plus students at the time that I got there. So I became head of school of a 360 student independent K-8 with limited resources. It was on the tail end of the recession and we had staffing shortages everywhere. I'm talking literally everywhere. I could go through the laundry list. You know, our coaches were parent volunteers who also drove the buses. We didn't have much in terms of IT and tech. And by the way, we were in a community where we really needed to up our game in order to stay competitive. And being short-staffed really did not help. And our administration was overwhelmed. I had this mandate from the board to take our school to the next level. And it was really hard to do what needed to be done with all of the limitations we had in people and in bandwidth and whatnot. And people actually started at the beginning to complain to me that I was pushing them too hard. And I was just trying to execute on what I understood was my mandate, was my mission. And so that's an important thing. And I think anyone here who does take their directives from somebody else, whether that's a board, whether that's a superior, whether it's your customers or clients, you have to be mindful of the fact that you want to get more done, but you have people that you're trying to push, and maybe you're pushing too hard or too fast, or in some way creating discomfort. So that was part of what I was dealing with, and I needed to change. So I started to figure things out because I knew that I could not succeed otherwise. And thankfully, I was able to begin with some early wins. I began to master the delegation process, finding individuals who I could task different responsibilities to, getting better at it, understanding what was working, what wasn't. Eventually, towards the end of my time as headmaster, I actually went back to school and studied to become a PsyD, which thankfully I have achieved actually quite some time already. And since that point in time, I've begun to organize and systematize my delegation information in a way that's allowed me to teach it to audiences all over the world. And I know that there's somebody on this call right now who did participate in a live event I did about a month ago. And that event it wasn't focused exclusively on delegation by any means, but it was something that we did talk about because of the importance relating to becoming more productive. So over time, I would use delegation to manage my meetings calendar by having somebody else take primary responsibility there, but giving her clear direction. To provide more teacher oversight and feedback, which is the number one responsibility, as we all know, of a school leader, is to get into classrooms, to observe teacher performance, and to give them concrete and meaningful feedback. We instituted a school-wide student behavior program to ensure that the comportment of the students was in alignment with our values and allowed for learning to occur properly. We would upgrade our technology significantly, both in terms of the technology itself as well as with the personnel. And a very important piece for a head of school is to be able to interface with donors and to make solicitations. All of those things were allowable, so to speak, to me, meaning to say I was able to do more of that because I learned how to delegate and to take things off of my plate so that I could be available for the things that were most important for me specifically to be doing. Okay, so how does this apply to you? And again, I'm going to ask you for some feedback here. Perhaps you feel like your head is all over the place, right? You're constantly chasing your tail. Maybe you're overwhelmed with all that you must get done. Maybe your personal life is suffering, or you're worried about falling farther and farther behind in your work. If you don't mind sharing, I know we had some feedback on this before. I'd love to see it again so that I have it super fresh in my mind before we launch into this. Which one would you say is the biggest challenge for you? Let's go one at the top. And then as we move further, thank you, David, for getting us started. Nikhil, appreciate it. 2 votes for number 4 so far. So it seems like some folks you're working hard. I'm sure you're not slouching. At the same time, it's hard to keep up. And I see different answers over here. So I think we what's the word I'm looking for? We got some resonance on all 4 of them. Okay, so keep those answers coming and let's continue. Not to worry. I have a simple solution that's going to get your professional and personal life back in order and fast. So we have something to the rescue, and that is coming right now. Let me share with you a couple of stories of what I call delegate to accelerate client success stories. I'm going to begin with David, who's a small business owner. The problem David was dealing with is that he was working overtime. He did not take vacation. He was working, as they say, in the business rather than on the business, and could not scale his business because he was far too busy every day just dealing with various aspects of what his business required from him. The solution that we put into place was to work to reposition existing personnel and to bring on a manager to whom he could delegate many of those day-to-day responsibilities that he had taken on for himself. And the result of that was David being out there meeting and selling his product and service so that others could understand it, benefit from it, hire him, and allow him to increase his business, while, by the way, simultaneously allowing him more time away from the office completely for himself, his wife, and his family. Another story I'd like to share with you is that of Peril, who's a school principal up in Canada. The problem she had was that she could not get home at a decent hour. She was on, as they say, the burnout freeway. She told me that if she wasn't going to get a solution soon, she was likely going to retire. The school was not interested in that. She deep down didn't want that either. As far as I know, she's still there. And so we worked on a task analysis to focus on what are all the tasks she was doing, which are the ones that she should continue to do, and which were the ones that were available for delegation. And then we identified internal people that she could start to delegate to. So maybe these were classroom teachers, or they had other responsibilities, and she promoted them, at least part-time. I don't remember all the specifics at the moment, but she promoted them in a way that allowed them to take many of these responsibilities from her. And the result was a much relieved and rejuvenated leader, to the point where she shared this following feedback. Take a look. I'm curious to know from this feedback over here, what would you say jumps out at you the most? Which line, which concept would you say was for you, looking at it from Peril's perspective, the most meaningful? Or at least what would be most meaningful for you to get a similar result if this was your situation? Okay, get off the treadmill. I micromanage tasks. Okay, got off the micromanaging, on task time, almost immediate results. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Really, really appreciate your feedback. And by the way, I'm noticing many of the same people again and again, and I love that you're all doing that. For those of you on the call who have yet to contribute on the chat, please do so. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so here's my question for you. Would you like to get similar results as Peril or as David? Thumbs up work. A yes would work. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, thank you, David. Dan, appreciate it. Keep them coming, everybody. Okay, so let's go get those results. All right, so I've got great news for you. You are about to discover the three secrets. Unfortunately, I'm really bad with drum rolls. Otherwise, I would do one for you. But I think this is drum roll time, right? Secret number one, why leaders must delegate and why most don't. Secret number two, what leaders should delegate as well as what they should not. And secret number three, how to delegate even when you don't have someone to delegate to. Ladies and gentlemen, the chat again is our friend. Please share with me the order of importance to you between these three secrets. Which one do you think that if you got the answer to would most benefit you and your business in your day to day? It looks like three is a biggie for everybody here. Keep them coming, everyone. Okay, so let's dive into that. And I'm going to keep all of your feedback in mind. I really do appreciate what you are sharing. Okay, so are you ready to get started? If you are, you could just give you a big woohoo where you are. Okay, can't hear you, but you could definitely put something in the chat if you want to share that as well, because on your mark, get ready. We are launching our content, and please stay with me. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be asking you, I hope without promising, that for your biggest takeaway from today's presentation. And so can you kindly jot down as we go information that is most valuable to you? Even if we don't fully develop it, we will have opportunity to at least introduce it. And so I'm going to ask you to share what that is for you that at least gave you a sense of, oh, I didn't even realize. Because oftentimes, by the way, it's about demystification, right? It's about lifting the curtain, so to speak, and being able to let folks know what's even possible. David, to your question, I will be sharing the recording, which is happening as we speak. I will be sharing the recording at the back end of this presentation via email. So you will be getting that. Okay. So here's secret number one, why leaders must delegate and why most don't. So let's talk about it. I often present it as a question. And maybe, by the way, you can complete this sentence right now if you'd like. I would delegate more if. I would delegate more if. I had someone to delegate to. It was taken well by my staff. Keep them coming, guys. This is fantastic. I'm assuming trust, you mean, Joey, you could trust them. Okay. I knew what to trust them with. Interesting. It sounds like multiple components there, Yechiel. Okay. I had one to think through maybe I had time. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Sometimes we don't even have the time. I was better at being able to do so, right? Sometimes we don't trust ourselves. That's what I was kind of digging at before with my comment to Joey. Okay. Clear, repeatable tasks that don't require my control. Nice. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do a little reveal over here to show you what some of the more common ones are. And then we're going to vote in the context of what is most relevant to you. Just as a reminder, we keep all of the, let's see over here just a second. So let's go into this next slide over here. So here is I changed it a little bit. I should have said I would delegate more, but you get the idea. It was the same basic sentence. I'm curious to know of these 8, which would you say is most relevant to you? Number 1, it takes too long to delegate things, so I just do it myself. Number 2, I don't have the right people on staff to task things to. Number 3, how can I delegate if I can't trust my people to do things correctly? Number 4, it's so hard to give up control. I need to have my stamp on everything. By the way, if you're a perfectionist, that might resonate with you. Number 5, I just don't know how or what to delegate or who to choose. I should read that again. That was a little choppy. I just don't know how or what to delegate or who to choose. Number 6, I have a hard time enough doing my own work, let alone supervising others. Number 7, my people resent being asked and or won't take the job seriously. Number 8, it's a boring job, so I just do it myself. Wow, looking at your answers over here. So 7 got some love, if that's the proper term. 5 is pretty popular here as well. Let's look at those again. Okay, 5 is the nuts and bolts, the what, the how, all the 5 W's, if you will. Okay, number 7, people will resent it, so we'll have to talk about that more. By the way, for those of you who chose number 7, if you could elaborate a little bit more about what you're thinking, I'd be very curious of what that looks like for you. Seems like trust is an issue for a couple of folks. I'm looking at the other numbers here. I saw 1, it takes too long, right? So you ask yourself, well, if it's going to take all this time, I may as well just do it myself. So we'll have to address as much of that as we possibly can. Okay, so you keep the answers coming, please. I'm going to keep looking. In the meantime, let's go further into the content that we have here. Now, it is interesting. I just actually put this into the PowerPoint a short while ago. I recently did a poll on LinkedIn, and here's some feedback that I got. So you'll see if your answer is in alignment with what other people were sharing. Not that it really matters. What's important to you is important to you. It's not, what they say, but it is something that I'm curious about. And most folks, 50% indicated that it was all about their people. By the way, I only had 4 answers there, not all 8. And so it's not a fair comparison 100%, but you get the feel, I'm sure. Okay, let's see here. The comments, not so much about people resenting it, but they won't accept the delegation. Okay, they won't accept it because that the staff is wondering why I can't do it myself. Interesting. Okay, why are you giving me your work in a sense? And maybe that's really a question of how have you divided roles and responsibilities, something we could probably discuss further offline. My tasks often involve personal touch and creativity. I only have certain things with standard operating procedures. Okay, so maybe that's a matter of creating more of those, Dan, in order to help you, because the more things are clear and largely repetitive in nature, the more you should be able to delegate. That thought that I am the supervisor getting paid more money to do blank work that I think they could do. Okay. In other words, because it sounds like, Colleen, you're saying that because you're paid more, there's an assumption that you will work harder. What I like to think, and I encourage all my clients to think about, is that the reason you're getting paid more is probably because you have a greater skill set. You're more experienced, you have greater credentials, and you've demonstrated greater capacity. That doesn't mean you have to do more work. It just means you have to be doing higher leverage work. You have to be doing strategic and visionary work. You have to be doing the kinds of things that position everybody else to be successful. So actually, if you think of yourself not as a worker, but as a orchestrator, so to speak, of others, a conductor of a tremendous philharmonic of people pulling together to create a tapestry and beautiful music and all of that, then your role is clearly defined differently in your own mind. And of course, that's going to manifest in the mind of others because, ladies and gentlemen, and this, by the way, is something I'm going to dive into in that masterclass, as I'll talk about later, is that delegation is a culture issue. And often we don't even think about that. Setting the culture in your institution, in your office, with your team is critical. And you more than anyone else do that if you're a leader. And so therefore, if you're not setting that expectation, if you're not creating that culture, if you are basically viewing yourself as a glorified member of the team, you're just promoted, but you're like one of them still. And by the way, that happens with sales managers that were part of a sales team that get promoted, teachers that become principals, anyone who is within the same organization and gets promoted from within in particular, it's usually that way. Oftentimes they have a hard time seeing themselves as different. And certainly others have a hard time seeing them as different as well. So you have to not only assume that leadership role, but you also need to create a culture where delegation is recognized, is valued, and is seen as essential for your team to optimize and to get more done. So there's more to talk about for sure, but I think we have to understand that before. Dan, I don't disagree with you. You have more responsibility, but that doesn't mean you have to work harder. It just means you have you're where the buck stops. But again, if you're thoughtful about what you're going to do and what others are going to do, when you're going to step in to assist and when you're not, then you can still manage your workload in a much more efficient way than I would imagine other people, that some of us are doing right now. Okay, so these are all things to think about. Now, what's the truth? Despite these reasons for not delegating, it can be done and it must be done, right? There are things in life that we don't want to do because it's not convenient, but we know that we need to, because if we don't, bad things will happen, right? So a classic example is self-care, specifically nutrition and exercise. We know we need to eat well, especially as we age, and we know that we need to exercise on a regular basis if we're going to keep our bodies where they need to be so that they could serve us in our day-to-day work and everything that's valuable to us. If we don't, we will suffer the consequences because that's just nature, right? Manifesting. And when it comes to delegation, it's really the same thing. Here are some examples. More and more leaders are working longer and longer days. Some even work on weekends to keep up, just out of curiosity. Use the chat, please, to share this. How many of you would say that you work beyond the quote reasonable scope? When I say reasonable, you could define that probably in 1,000 different ways. But what normally people would define as these are your parameters of your work time. I'm not talking about the 24/6 or 24/7 mindset of being available at any hour. I'm talking about actual when you should be working. How many of you would say that you exceed that you're working longer and longer days, that you're oftentimes working on the weekends, that you're feeling burnt out as a result of this kind of work? Okay, thank you, Colleen and Ellie, for getting us started. Would love to see other people's feedback as well. Okay, and for those of you who are saying no, you're obviously here anyway, and that's because I would imagine that you have other benefits and other reasons as to why delegation is important to you. So let's unpack it further. The good news is you can do it. It's just that no one ever taught you how, and that's why I'm here to be able to assist. Okay, the reality why leaders must delegate. So besides what I mentioned before about the amount of time, the burnout issue and all of that, let's talk practically. You cannot control every activity, right? You cannot put your stamp on everything. Now, some of you may work more or less for yourselves or have a very small team and you really could get involved, but you don't want to. Besides the fact that it feels like you're really controlling, on top of it, it's just not healthy, right? There's a limit of workload capacity. We can only do so much. So as a company, as an organization grows, specialization is increasingly necessary. This last point is different. This last point is no longer about just your actual capacity to work. It's also about specialization, which means to say you want people on your team who have specialized knowledge and experience so that they could step up where appropriate and do certain things that maybe other people can't do nearly as well. And if we all try to be jack of all trades and do it all ourselves, then by definition, we're not going to be good at any of them to the degree that would constitute excellence and super high proficiency. So that's another reason as to why we need to be thinking about delegation so that we could find the right people for the right jobs and give them opportunity to grow into them so that they develop that expertise that we don't necessarily have to develop by or for ourselves. By the way, any questions, comments, etc., please do use the chat. I'm checking often to make sure that I am being responsive. Okay. Now, here's some other reasons to delegate. Number one, you have, let's say, a big project or responsibility to assign. You want to be able to focus on the big rocks. The big rocks are, for those of you not familiar, Stephen Covey's example, where you've got the rocks and the sand and the pebbles and the water, and you have to figure out what goes into the glass first in order to ensure that everything fits. And the only way to make it all fit is if you put the big rocks in first. And that's a great metaphor for our work as well, right? You want to do those big rocks, ideally first thing in the morning, and you certainly want to prioritize them over everything else. And you want to do it in a time where you're most energized, where you're most focused, we're able to really attend to them. That's what we call the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our results will come from 20% of our activities. What are those? And what are the things we want to take care of right away to accomplish those big outcomes? So we can say already at a relatively early point in my day was a success. And Brian Tracy talks about eating that frog. It's a little bit different. The idea there is that some things we don't want to do, they're just not pleasant for us, but we do them anyway because we have to. Another reason to delegate is you want to help your people grow. Right? Hopefully everybody here thinks about leadership in an open sense. We think about abundance and we want to be able to pass it forward because I'm assuming all of us had at least one person that invested in us, at least one person that saw our greatness or our potential and gave us the opportunity to grow, to shine, to assume new responsibility. We want to be able to do the same for the next person. Our generation, this generation, I would say in particular, needs leadership, quality leadership, more so than ever before. And we should be in the business of building leaders as much as we possibly can. Helping to clear the bottleneck is another one. Everything has to go through you to get approval before it gets moved forward. It's going to slow everything down. So you want to delegate responsibility and authority. And finally, and this is one of the things I was referring to before, consistency of process, right? If you have people within, for example, a machinery or manufacturing plant where they are constantly shifting roles, yes, you want to be able to have there are certain benefits of doing that, but you also want people to become experts in a specific area so that there can be consistency in the outcome, consistency in the processes, and that will give you the best result. So when you delegate, you create opportunities for that consistency because certain people are tasked to certain things and they do them repeatedly. All right, so that's secret number one. Now let's move on to secret number two, which is what leaders should delegate as well as what they shouldn't, right? It's not everything, right? You're not going to abdicate, you're not going to punt. You're going to take on certain things and you're going to delegate other elements. Because many people think that delegation, is all or nothing. Either you delegate and delegate everything, or you don't delegate at all. The truth is, however, that there are clear rules that govern what we should be delegating as well as what we shouldn't. Would anyone like to take a crack at it before I share this information with you? What would you say are some of the things that let's start with what you should. What are some of the responsibilities, tasks, etc., that you should be delegating? Okay, admin stuff. Time-sensitive things should not be. Okay. Tasks that are duplicatable, if I got that right. Thank you, Dan. Clear recurring tasks. I think same concept, but a little bit easier for me to pronounce. Okay, what else do we have, ladies and gentlemen? Things that you should be delegating that don't need your expertise. Excellent. What else do we have? In about 30 seconds, we're going to pivot to the things that we should not be delegating, but let's finish this one first. Okay, maybe we should pivot sooner. Let's talk about some things that we should not be delegating. One item that was mentioned before is something that is time sensitive. What else do we have? Seems like Joey is talking about something that you should delegate. Well, we're going to see if we should really delegate everything. Okay. Things that don't fit in your job description. You're not a secretary. Okay. All right. Some good stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all of this. Let me now share a list with you and let's see how well it lines up with what you've already shared. Okay. Here's what I call the what to delegate and what not to. And by the way, during the masterclass that I'm going to talk about later, all of the items here that we're running through pretty quickly, we will dive more deeply into and make personal and relevant applications so that you really feel that you are clear and supported in your process. Okay, so for delegation, I'm curious to know here, is there anything on the list? Let's talk about the things that you are surprised to see. Is there anything on the what to delegate list that you would think doesn't belong there or maybe was a bit of a surprise for you? Okay, let's see what we have in the chat over here. Is it interesting? Not responsible was interesting. I'm assuming that that's two different answers. Okay, number 7. Okay, why would someone have a task that they are not responsible for? Well, I mean, there are tasks that come up that aren't your responsibility but do need to get done, and that's typically something that you're going to delegate. Okay, so is the task interesting? Maybe that's something you didn't think about before, but you want to delegate things that people will appreciate doing, that they'll find stimulating, that gives them an opportunity to grow. Let's talk about the do not delegate side. Is there anything there that surprised you as being on the list as something that you would typically assume should not be delegated? I'm sorry, you wouldn't expect that that would be on the list of something not to delegate. Boring. Number 5 is a praise or reprimand. Okay, so number 5, I'll go through them. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll come back to that. Right, boring versus interesting. Thank you, Colleen. All right, so I'm going to go through the list as you are continuing to contemplate on your end. When we think about what to delegate, if the task is routine, that means it's something that you could train them. Dan, you were alluding to this before, I believe. This is something that you, because it's routine, you could train someone and they can do it time and again. Is the task interesting? Right? It doesn't mean that you only delegate fun and exciting tasks, but it certainly makes it a lot easier when somebody would find it to be intellectually stimulating and challenging. Could someone else do it better? By the way, that's something that we have to sometimes do an ego check, right? To recognize that we're not great at everything, even though maybe our mothers told us otherwise. Number 4 is that a task that someone else would enjoy, similar to number 2. But we always want to increase workplace engagement. Very, very important. It's one of the biggest challenges that companies and organizations have today, that their people are not sufficiently engaged. Their effort is not where it needs to be. People just don't enjoy coming to work, doing the work. So the more that you can make enjoyable, their experience enjoyable, increase engagement, the better. Is it good for someone's development? We talked about that before, building leaders. Is it time consuming? Oftentimes, those are the kinds of things you want to delegate because, again, you are limited in time and you have to think about where would your time be most valuable for the company organization that you are leading. And number 7, is it something that you're not directly responsible for, but somehow wound up on your lap and you kind of took it? I'll give you an example. As a head of school, I took a lot of responsibility for the contents of our newsletter. Part of that was perfectionism. Part of it was because my name was on it. Part of it was because I wanted to make sure that the message was clear. And there were issues with how they were being processed prior to my arrival. But I probably, in retrospect, spent too much time on them and could have been utilizing my time differently and assign that to somebody else because it really wasn't my responsibility. It was just something we knew that had to get out, but it didn't have to be my responsibility to ensure that all the content was exactly what it needed to be. Right? What not to delegate? If it's boring, people will resent it. If it's a crisis, that's certainly not a time to be delegating, especially if the person is not equipped. Obviously, the person is equipped. You could delegate that, but otherwise, you would keep that for yourself. If it's ill-defined, which means to say it's not very clear, right? As Yogi Berra was fond of saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So if you don't have a clear sense of what the outcomes are, that's going to be really, really tough to delegate. Is it confidential? Those are the kinds of things you typically keep to yourself. Is it praise or reprimand? Somebody had a question about this earlier. Usually the leader should be delivering the praise, or if somebody needs to be working differently or better, that should be handled as well. Now, you can sometimes delegate these things. I had an assistant head of school, and sometimes I would ask her to step in if there was an issue, etc. Maybe a parent would call and complain, or there would be some kind of issue that we needed to resolve with the teacher. Otherwise, I might have asked her to provide that feedback or that corrective instruction. But for the most part, people want to hear from the leader, whether for the good or even if there is something critical that they need to hear. Does it involve planning? Again, unless the person really understands the roles and responsibilities, the leader needs to be involved. Now, by the way, we're not going to really get into this now. I will dive more deeply into it in the masterclass, but there is something called the 10-80-10 rule of John Maxwell, which in effect says at the beginning and at the end, when there is most, what's the word I'm looking for? That's when the greatest amount of leader involvement takes place. Think of it like a plane, takeoff and landing, right? So at the beginning, you need to be very involved. At the end, you need to be very involved. And in the middle, you can step back and give the individual or the team more latitude and more space to do what needs to be done. And then finally, are you responsible? Because if you're responsible, going and delegating it to others would not produce the outcome that you want, and certainly would be irresponsible. Any questions or comments at this point on this slide before we move forward? Take another moment to see what else you have here. David, when you say number 3, clarify please what you're saying or asking. Okay, so as we are clarifying, are you talking now on the left or on the right, please? I'll start on the right, see if I get it. If it's ill-defined, that means that, yeah, okay. So if it's ill-defined, that means that the responsibility is not yet clearly articulated in your own mind. So asking somebody else to do something that you aren't yourself sure as to what it is or what a quality outcome looks like, that's going to be really hard to delegate. In effect, what you're asking the other person to do is to define that themselves. Okay. And that's something that they can potentially do, but to just delegate it to them and say it's now your role and responsibility is a big ask of somebody else. So minimally, I would say that you want to be involved in that process. I hope that clarifies. By the way, you might find it interesting. This is called the Eisenhower matrix. I have 2 of them side by side. Thank you, by the way, Jonathan. I agree with you. You'll notice that they're both the urgent, non-urgent, right? Important, non-important matrix. You might have seen it in Stephen Covey. They both have, well, actually, these are known as the 4 Ds, though neither of these actually have them as Ds. It's do, the 4 Ds are do, defer, delegate, delete. Here we have do, plan, delegate, eliminate, or do, plan, delegate, and limit. But what you have in effect are the 4 quadrants, where in the top left, which is quadrant 1, is urgent and important. Urgent and important from a school example might be that the fire department is at the front door and they need to do a check of some kind, or God forbid there's some kind of safety issue at the school. That's an urgent matter. Everything else has to drop. You've got to deal with that right now. Okay, you've got a crisis or a deadline. Your creditor is on the phone, the IRS is calling, whatever that looks like. Okay, that's not a planned thing per se. That's something that you have to just deal with right now. Where leaders want to be for the most part is in quadrant number 2. You want to be working on things that are important. but not urgent. Relationships, new opportunities, strategic thinking, improving your systems, setting goals, right? All of those things, exercise, right? It's not urgent, but it is important. If you don't do it on a regular basis, you will suffer the consequences. Where delegation fits into this is in quadrant number 3, bottom left. And these are the kinds of things where the value is relatively low. Somebody else can do it. And by having somebody else handle it for you, you as a result are free to do more of quadrant 2. So answering emails and phone calls, scheduling and maybe attending meetings, running errands, dealing with a variety of responsibilities. Now, in all honesty, what they have over here in quadrant 3 does seem to demean or lessen what I think what you can be delegating, meaning to say you could delegate more than that, more than what they say over here. It doesn't have to just be little things that can be delegated. But the point is, you're not going to delegate the quadrant 2 items. Anything that's beneath that, as far as day-to-day activities that don't require your direct responsibility, the first question you want to ask time and again is, how can I delegate this? Even, by the way, and it's interesting because I did a strategy session with a woman not long ago. She has responsibility to many healthcare facilities in a variety of states relating to their census and how numbers are reported. And it's getting to a point where, with the delegation that she and I discussed, that she actually doesn't even have a full day. And I told her that it was better for the company long term for her to continue to delegate, even if it meant hiring somebody else, because she was doing secretarial work just to fill her day. And I said to her, your responsibilities will expand. They're taking on new acquisitions, they're expanding their portfolio. Your work will increase over time, but you have to shift your mindset. You have to be able to take these things off of your plate and keep them off your plate and protect your plate with a certain zeal to make sure that you're never doing the kind of work that somebody else should be doing. And then, of course, we have quadrant number 4, which is not urgent and not important, which means it should not be done. You want to limit that as much as possible. Okay. So, David, the answer is, this is not all about the workplace. These may be things that are relevant to your personal life as well. Now, it doesn't mean you can never do these kinds of things, but you have to figure out where they fit. If you're going to do a pleasurable activity that you think is going to regenerate you, then it probably would be the equivalent of exercise on some level. It's really a matter of what your priorities are and how you're applying it. Is this relevant to your workplace, or is it relevant to your life at large? Moving on, here's another way to think about what you should or should not be doing. It's called the must, should, could pyramid. And you'll notice that with pyramids, it's always wider at the bottom and narrower at the top, which means whatever the bottom represents, there's more of it. And whatever the top represents, there's less of it. So using the left pyramid for now, this is just the framework. You want to move from what others must do, which is a lot of it, to what others should do, but leader could help in an emergency, to leader could do, but others could do if given the opportunity and training, which means to say that the bottom 3 rungs, so to speak, of this pyramid, even though they obviously don't have rungs, are the lion's share of activities in a company or on a team. And the leader is only getting involved here and there, but is thinking about ways by which to involve others as much as possible. It's only when you get towards the top where you have the things that the leader should do, but could involve others if they want to expand their leadership, and things that the leader must do. And a lot of that we've hit on already. Any comments or questions specific to this slide? Anything here that you're surprised about where it's placed, for example? Or just in general, that there's this idea of must, should, and could. Thank you, Jonathan. As you see, by the way, and I'm still looking for your feedback, I'd love to see it. You'll see that a lot of this is discipline and a lot of it is filtering, right? You have to be able to filter through your mind. Is this relevant? Is it not? But the same way, for example, when you go shopping, you're constantly filtering out all the things that are not relevant. Otherwise, you'd come home with the entire grocery store. That's, by the way, why they put things in our line of sight, because they want to catch our eyes and draw our attention to things that we may not have had intention to buy. But our life is filled with shiny objects. And those don't have to be physical things or widgets. They could be opportunities, they could be tasks. We have to be able to filter everything that happens in the workday through a framework or a prism that makes sense for us, that we could easily apply and say, is this something I should be doing? Is this something I must be doing? Is it something I could be doing? And you kind of work your way through that process. And then you say to yourself, no, this is not for me to be doing. And I'm going to delegate it to somebody else. And if I don't have that person, we'll talk about that soon, but I got to figure that out because I cannot be doing this. Okay. Thank you for that realization, Jonathan. And I certainly appreciate your feedback. Others are welcome to chime in as well. Okay. Yeah, you're right, Dan. The filtering does take time, which is why if you go to the store with a shopping list, you will be more efficient and you will come back with fewer purchases that you should not have made. There's a lot of research on that. And that's why we bring those lists, right? These are all valid points. I don't want to make this too much about the grocery store, but I hope you understand the example. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, but Jonathan, you will develop that. That's part of it too, by the way. When you develop habits and you start to learn how to think about things, you don't need to think about it as much. When I talked about exercise before, so I have a routine. I don't want to get into this too much, but one of the things that I do is I put on my clothes the night before. I try to remove as many barriers as possible for my ability to do what I know needs to get done. And so once you start to think about it, you'll be able to figure out, where does this fit? And initially it's going to take time. You're probably familiar with the four phases. We move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, which means I don't even know what I don't know, to I know what I don't know. Let's think about driving a car for a minute. So before, maybe I didn't know there's something called a car or any of the details associated with it. Now I know there's a car, but I have no idea of what the dash means, what any of the the handles and tools are used for. Then I become consciously competent, which means I can do it, but I can only do it with thought. I have to shut off all distractions and really focus and get everything set up exactly right. And then only eventually do we get to the level of conscious incompetence. Sorry, the opposite. Unconscious competence. Unconscious competence, which means to say, I don't even have to think about it anymore. And immediately I know the answer. Immediately I can do what needs to be done. I could drive while listening or talking because I already have that mastery. That's how we can develop over time. Let's move along because time is starting to become scarce. Delegation worksheet is just an example. This is something I would be distributing as well. And this is a question you ask yourself. What is the task? Can it be delegated? And to whom? And if you go through all of your tasks today, everything you commonly do, and you start to plug it into this framework, you'll start to come to awareness about what can and should be delegated that hasn't been delegated by you in the past, at least not consistently so. And finally, we get to secret number 3, which is how to delegate even when you don't have someone to delegate to, which many of you said was the biggest secret, so to speak, or the aha for you that you would like to get out of this training. And by the way, as a reminder again, please jot down some takeaways that you can share at the back end to ensure that you have something meaningful for you to work on moving forward. Okay, there was a question about the right column to whom. Okay, hopefully it's clear. What is the task? Can it be delegated? And to whom? You can take a quick screenshot if that is helpful. T-5, 4, 3. Okay, let's move on. All right, so here's the secret. I don't have people, right? How do I delegate? So many people think that even though I don't know what to delegate, I do know what to delegate, and I'm ready to do it, and I'm excited about it. I still don't have anyone to delegate to. Just out of curiosity, how many of you would say that that is your problem or a problem for you? Use the chat. Thumbs up. I'll check in the participants. Me. Okay. Thank you, David. Anyone else? All right, Dan. Thank you so much. Keep those answers coming. All right. Let's keep going. In the meantime, the truth is you do have options. So if you literally have nobody, it may very well be time to hire. And what I would advise you to do is use primary task lists and related skill set as the key driver, meaning to say, what are the things that need to get done? And see if you can find someone who aligns with the skills you want to be delegating to somebody else. So when actually you're using that list that we had before, as your driver to create the job description and to start to filter out the right possible candidates. And for the short term, you may want to consider a VA. There are many platforms, there are many companies now that will supply you with virtual assistants for a relatively affordable price. Oftentimes they live in other countries, but are trained to work with Americans and American businesses or organizations. Option number two is you already have the person on staff. You just sometimes need to reimagine their current workload or their current responsibility. Maybe they have some, they're an unpolished diamond or uncut, and they just need your guidance, support, vision of what they can become. And all of a sudden, they're brand new, sparkling, fresh, and ready to take on a new responsibility. The answer, Dan, by the way, is it doesn't have to be only short term, but you might not, hiring somebody might take a little bit of time. And you might just say, I want to at least start with a VA and explore if that's something that would be valuable to me moving forward. And then if I see there's real value, that I keep that person on, or I go and I make the full-time investment that hiring somebody would require, at least part-time. Okay. Depends on the time of day, depends on the season, not have funds. Number two might work. Okay. Thank you for your feedback, everybody. Let me tell you a story about Leslie real quick. A wonderful woman. When I came to the school, she was the office manager. She oversaw all sorts of things. She had a lot of talent. We had a lot of needs, and making matters really, really short in the interest of time, I promoted her to fill a number of responsibilities that were being plugged by other people, to include admissions director, to handle primary responsibility in the areas of marketing and community outreach. And so that allowed her to fill needs for us as a school. It allowed me to tap into more of her resources. I gave her a small financial bonus as well for this promotion that she was given. And she still thanks me today for the opportunity to do more. She never would have asked for it. She's like really, really gentle in that way, but at the same time had the strength and the temperament to do what needed to be done. And that was a huge win for us. Now, without, again, diving too deeply into it, this is another piece. You'll notice, ladies and gentlemen, that delegating is which quadrant of these four. I'll describe what this is in a second. But in this model, which quadrant is delegation? So in the interest of time, I will answer the question, but I am still looking at the chat to see if anything lights up. It is quadrant 4, the green quadrant. Okay, so when a person starts, they need a lot of directing. They're very excited, they're enthusiastic, they're committed, but their competence is very low. So you need to tell them, do this, do that. Over time, you're still coaching them, which means to say you're providing them with support. Their commitment starts to wane a little bit because they're banging their head against the wall. They're starting to see that it's not as easy as they thought it would be. So they need that support. They also need to be directed. Over time, you're going to step further away. You'll provide a supporting role to make sure that they continue to move in the right direction, that their growth trajectory continues to point upward. And only eventually at the end, you get to what's called delegating. This, by the way, is based on the model of Ken Blanchard and the 1-minute manager. That's where this idea originates. But so you see over here, you don't really truly delegate until a person has demonstrated real capacity. So it's somewhat of a continuum. It's a bit of a dance, and every situation will look different. But I've already shared with you a few different ways of looking at what delegation really is, as opposed to what some other approaches may be that are more fitting and appropriate depending on the circumstances and the individual you're dealing with. Okay, obviously you need to build their knowledge and efficacy, what they know, what they need to know in terms of knowledge and skills, give them a way by which to learn it, give them an opportunity to practice. Efficacy is all about your self-confidence and your belief that I can do this. And that comes with the support that you're going to provide. Okay, sometimes you need to do a gap analysis. Where are they now? Where do they need to be? And what are the skills? What are the tools? What is the information that they need in order to get there? Right? So you want to move them from where you are to where you need to be. And that is part of the process of delegating. So right now, you might see them as blue, and that's not what you want. But if you can imagine the purple, so to speak, behind it or within them, it's just a matter of time and training, then those are the kind of people that oftentimes can rise to the top and be a huge asset for you. And by the way, when you promote from within, you're usually able to do it at a much more user-friendly price than if you're hiring from elsewhere. If people are getting promoted and brought in from another company or organization, it'll usually cost you more, not only in the recruitment and in, any ancillary costs, but just in core salary, because it's a different construct, and we're not going to get into that now because of time, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so let's review. And I think this is probably a great time for me to get your feedback on your biggest takeaways. So far, we've covered secret number 1, why leaders must delegate and why most don't. Secret number 2, what leaders should delegate and what they shouldn't. And secret number 3, how to delegate even when you don't have someone to delegate to. So if you can kindly use the chat and share with me your biggest aha. You can put more than one if you'd like, but minimally 1 per person, please. I'd love to see everybody respond here. Something that you've taken away thus far that you would say justified your time on this call today. Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jonathan. Looking to see other responses as well. And I'm going to keep my eye on this as we move forward. Okay, not to delegate boring tasks, the pyramids. David, maybe you could specify what you mean by never thought of. Talking about the secrets or something else. Delegation is a culture issue. Thank you, Colleen. I'm glad that resonated. Okay, and I told you that I want everybody to stay to the end because I have something very special to share with you. So bear with me for just a few minutes. I will end on time. That is my guarantee. All right, so here's my question for you. Hopefully you saw that there's a lot on the topic, and there's a lot, by the way, I didn't even touch today because it's such a broad topic, delegation, even though it seems like one single thing, there's a lot to think about. My question to you is, who wants to take things to the next level? I hope the answer is me, as in everyone here. But certainly I'd love to hear your feedback on that. And with that, I want to introduce or maybe reintroduce the Delegate to Accelerate Masterclass, which is a virtual masterclass that you can attend from the comfort of your home or office. And bear with me for a few moments as I share with you some of the specifics in this offering. The DTA is Delegate to Accelerate. The masterclass will help you to gain control of your time, prioritize what's most important, learn how to delegate. It will ultimately help you reduce stress and protect more of your we time as well as your me time. What you'll get inside is a deep dive about the why, the what, the who, and the how of delegation, right? All of these components that we've been talking about, which we've just scratched the surface on, we will go much more deeply over the series. By the way, it's 4 one-hour sessions. I'll talk about that more shortly. Okay, session number 1, we're going to do a self-assessment. How well do I delegate right now? We'll talk about why delegation is so important and why so many leaders still don't do it. That's something we discussed today, but we'll go deeper there. I will detail the 13 steps in an overview format of effective delegation. We've hit on a few of them today, but most of them we didn't really touch. And I'll share more Delegate to Accelerate stories. That's just in the first session. The second one, which is the what, how to create a delegation culture. Talked about that before. Colleen mentioned it just now. What to and what not to delegate. Very important, right? Because we have to really go through that process. I gave it to you really quick, but if you're going to be thoughtful and mindful and start to figure out, especially those gray areas that are not so clear, you want to be able to tease those out with more time and more focus. Session number 3 will be the who. Who do I delegate to even if I don't feel I have the right person or that the person is improperly trained? We'll unpack the situational leadership model in greater detail. That's what I showed you before with Ken Blanchard. How to identify and then fill gaps while building skill sets. So how do I figure out what my needs are? And of course, what people currently have, and how do I fill those gaps to ensure that they're the right people to delegate to moving forward? And finally, question number 4 is the how. We'll unpack the 13 steps in greater detail. We'll make personal applications for everybody on the masterclass, and we'll do a proper wrap up to ensure that people are fully empowered to take all the information that we had shared and bring it to bear and bring it to practice in their day-to-day lives. Okay, so here's some feedback that others are sharing. These are people who've attended in the past. Some of these names you might recognize. People who attended, who felt that it was thorough, interactive, the information, how it was presented. If you feel that today's presentation was clear And if you feel that there were actionable takeaways, and I was, in all honesty, moving through a lot of content, there we're going to be able to slow it down a little bit and go deeper with the ability to ask and converse in much more of an interactive way, even than we did today. So you get all the benefits of today's session plus. And we're going to go through it step by step, one presentation after another. I'm going to share, by the way, a link which has more information. I'll give you the exact dates. These are after Passover. They're Wednesdays. I don't remember the exact time. I believe it's at 1 o'clock, but I have to double check. Either way, all the dates and all that information is there. This works for leaders who want to learn more, want to learn how to better manage their day so they can get more done, who would benefit from stronger organizational skills, who feel like they're not getting enough free time for their family or to do the things that they love, right? Most people don't get started because they feel like they don't have enough time. And the beauty is that I'm going to give you more time. By investing time in this process, you will have more time on a day-to-day basis to achieve the goals that you have, that you want. But what are you going to get? And by the way, I think the value here is tremendous. People who hire me one-to-one pay top dollar to get this kind of training. What you're going to get, I wouldn't charge you that much, but that is the market value, so to speak, for this. You're going to get all these tools and templates, the activity log that I mentioned before, the urgent important matrix that I showed you earlier that you can customize, the productivity blueprint, which is an ebook that I've written. You'll get that as well, plus all sorts of goodies that I will be sharing. And with those tools, you'll be able to do all the things that you see over here, the things that we talked about, be more productive, be more focused, be a better leader, understand the delegation process, do it like a ninja, and feel like you are in total control. You'll be able to say goodbye to the idea of feeling overworked, not being able to deal with stressful situations, not getting home on time. And I've done all of the research, so you don't have to worry about it. It's custom made. It's like when I do a workout in the morning, I don't have to think about what the exercise is. I just got to choose, am I doing strength or cardio or Tabata or whatever it is? But then it's already ready for me. I just have to follow along. And that's what this creates for you as well, a system that you could easily plug into that'll make your life so much easier, right? And here's my question for you, and you can please answer in the chat. If all that the masterclass did was to show you exactly how to get control of your day and to start managing your time so that it works for you and not the other way around, would it be worth the $29.95 to you? Right? I'm talking about long-term, permanent changes that'll affect your life today and for the future. Would it have that long-term value for you? I think most of us would agree that it would, right? We have to be willing to invest financially in our time for ourselves to grow. You can't just grow on your own. Otherwise, you trial and error and think about how long that takes. And who knows if you're even on the right path, right? If it would only help you get a few hours back per week, spend on what's most important, would it have that value? If all the masterclass did was to show you how to expertly and regularly delegate less important tasks to your colleagues, would it be worth $29.95? If it only allowed you to spend more time each evening with the people that you love or doing the things that are important to you, would it be worth $29.95 to you? And I think we all would agree that it would be, again, certainly over the aggregate of time. The beauty is, even though that is the value, I typically charge much less for it. The regular price would be $8.97 to participate. But because you are here and because you have invested in yourself to show up on this call today, and you really want to demonstrate what life could look like or to see what life could look like with new tools and skills, I am providing you not only with a reduced webinar price of $197, again, for 4 one-hour sessions with all the tools and templates and everything that I shared with you. But let's go one more slide because I'm going to make it even better. If you apply the webinar 10 code to your to your registration, meaning to say you plug in that code while you are registering, then you're going to get an extra 10%. I think it brings it down to like 177 and change. I'm going to drop the links into the chat here, and you'll get it in an email as well. Sorry for putting them together. The first one is the page to the masterclass, and the second one is specifically if you want to jump right in and register. Okay, use code webinar10. Write it down, please, so that you have it and you can use it. And by the way, some people love to bring friends along. They love to have that other person, maybe somebody from their office, maybe a colleague from a different organization that does similar work. If you are, or a cousin or a sibling, whatever, okay, bring somebody else along with you and message me, and I will make sure that you have a code for even deeper savings between the two of you. Okay, so that's just, again, a thank you from me for giving me the time to share this with you, to not only give you this content, but also give you the opportunity to take our learning one level further. So to wrap up, you've got two choices. Either you continue to struggle and get your basic daily tasks done, to not waste time putting out fires, to understand how and when and who and all that, to delegate, to find enough time to focus on your personal life. You could continue to struggle. It's an option. It's a choice. You've been doing it until now, so it's not like you can't continue to do it. Or you could spend $177.30. Here's the exact amount with that discount applied, which is the price of an outfit or a kitchen appliance or something else, right? And finally take back control of your time and your life. Those are your two choices. And by the way, if you do sign up and for whatever the reason you're dissatisfied, I do offer a 100% money back guarantee with no questions asked. So you do not need to worry about whether this will be a wise investment for you. So the real question is it worth risking a few hours and a few dollars, a relative pittance by comparison to what we often spend money on, to check this out, right? Even if it only does half of what I've claimed today that it will do, it'll pay for itself within a week, right? You'll see the benefits immediately, right? What are you going to get? Let's wrap it up. You'll get the masterclass, a wealth of tools and templates, including the delegation log, the urgent important matrix, the ebook that I mentioned before. The actual value is close to $3,000. Regular price is up to $900. I'm offering it to you at $197 minus the 10%, all down to $177.30. That's what you're going to get. And I really hope that you will take action. The time to act is now. By the way, anyone who does act, I'm just going to throw this in. I wasn't even planning on doing this. The first 3 people who do sign up, I'm also going to send a copy of my Becoming the Productive Boss inscribed to. So if you didn't get a copy, this will be an added gift. The first 3 people who register. Don't let another day pass by without full control of your time and your life. Time to start living a more balanced, organized, and productive life. Don't miss this unique opportunity to learn the skills that you need. Click the link that I shared with you to get started. Keep in mind that I'm limiting the group size because I want this to be engaging. So you want to act quickly to claim your spot. And I certainly look forward to seeing you in the Productivity Masterclass, which will be taking place next month, right after the Passover holiday, so that we could dive in without interruption into those various areas that we have talked about. The registration link is here. I'll send it to you one last time in the chat. And I really hope that everybody will take advantage of the opportunity. Does anyone have any final comments or questions? I would love to get your final feedback, your final thoughts. That was the page that I just shared. Is if you want to learn more about the general opportunity. And the one that I'm going to share with you now is if you want to jump right in and register. Thank you, Ellie, for being here. Thank you all for being here. I will be sharing the recording in an email in the not too distant future. I really hope that this was of tremendous value for you. Please share the word if you're willing to tag me on a post or put it out there on your status. Anything where you could say that you got some benefit here, it would mean a lot to me. And most importantly, I'd love to see you on the masterclass so we can go deep on a topic that will bring tremendous value for everybody here. Thank you again. Have a great day, a powerful rest of your week, and keep doing more of the right work so that you could achieve the results that you want to achieve. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you again, and bye-bye now.